Hey, beautiful soul. Welcome to Spirit Speakeasy. I'm Joy Giovanni, Joyful Medium. I'm a working psychic medium, energy healer, and spiritual gifts mentor. This podcast is like a seat at the table in a secret club, but with mediums, mystics, and the spiritual luminaries of our time. So come behind the velvet ropes with me and see inside my world as I chat insider style with profoundly gifted souls. We go deep, share juicy stories, laugh a lot, and it wouldn't be a speakeasy without great insider secrets and tips. You might even learn that you have some gifts of your own. So step inside the Spirit Speakeasy. Hey, beautiful soul. Have you ever heard of the Akashic Records? What about soul contracts or soul agreements? These are just a few of the things we are going to talk about today with our very special guest, Josephine Hardman. She is a master at Akashic Record healing and teaching people how to use their Akashic Records. This is so near and dear to my heart because Akashic Record work was something that was so important to me in my earlier development. It's something I still work with personally today. I don't offer it for clients in the way that Josephine does. So I am just really excited to have this conversation with her today and to get to share it with all of you, because I know that Akashic Records can be such a mystifying, broad topic sometimes, but Josephine has a really special way of breaking it down, explaining the pieces, explaining how it shows up in your real life. You guys know I like a real world application for things. Like I want to know, how is this showing up in our life? How is this helping us in this lifetime? So she talks about all of that with me and so much more. And she also has a podcast, and that is how I found out about her, but we'll touch on that in just a minute. Get yourself ready, whether you're listening as you drive or exercise, or you're just puttering around the house with a cup of tea or a cup of coffee. I'm so grateful to have you here for this conversation all about the Akashic Records. So with me, step inside Spirit Speakeasy. Hey, beautiful soul. Welcome back or welcome in if it's your first time to Spirit Speakeasy, your seat at the table. I am so excited for our chat today. This is someone who I reached out to because I am a fan of their podcast. So I'm going to read her bio for you, and then we're going to get started chatting. Our guest today is Josephine Hardman. Josephine is a PhD certified intuitive healer and Akashic Records practitioner and teacher. She spent 10 years teaching and writing literature courses at the college level before leaving academia to fulfill her true purpose to do spiritual work full time. Now, through her Akashic Records work and online programs, she helps clients and students awaken the healer within so they can fully own their gifts and share their brilliance with the world. Josephine also hosts a weekly podcast called Inner Work, a spiritual growth podcast. Welcome in, Josephine Hardman.
Oh, thank you so much for the invitation and for listening to my podcast. That really means the world to me. Yeah, so I'm excited to be here.
We were just chatting before we popped on. I try not to chat with anyone too much because I like to do the conversation live, but I did just tell Josephine that that's how I found her, is I am a fan of her podcast. You guys, if you know me, you know I love Akashic Record work. It's not something I offer currently, but I think it's so valuable. So I would love it if you could start with kind of just like a working definition for people who maybe are new to Akashic Record work or have just heard the term but kind of don't get it quite yet.
Yeah, no, that's a great place to start. And I always think about making it as concrete as possible, because it can be such an abstract concept and realm and topic. But basically how I define the Akashic Records is as a vast storehouse or archive of information, because we do live in a universe where it is made up of energy, basically, right?
Yeah.
So we feel like things are solid matter, but really there's this energetic universal grid and field behind that, what looks like a material reality. And so the records are basically held and deeply just ingrained in that, and a natural part of that energetic grid or energetic universal field. And as I'm sure your listeners know, energy can never really be destroyed, right?
Right.
So whenever a word is spoken or an action is taken or a choice is made, whatever it might be, there is an imprint of it that is left behind, and it is logged, so to speak. That's how I put it. And then archived into the records. So the records are all around us at all times. This is not some exclusive thing that only certain people have access to. So they're even in us and around us because we are part of that universal energy field too. So the records are in us. We are in the records at all times. It's just a matter of learning how to be able to sense the energy of the records and then access it in ethical, empowering, responsible, healing ways. But essentially, it's an archive of this universal information and guidance and healing energy as well.
Well, I love it. It's such a profound but like easy to digest
I
definition.
hope
So
so.
thank
Yeah.
you. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And see, you guys, this is why I love Josephine's podcast, because you really do, like, you give such thorough explanations. I mean, you have a background as a teacher, so it's no surprise there, and you're still a teacher. I would love it if you would just kind of share with us. I mean, coming from academia and having letters behind your name, and I know a lot of us get stuck in that, like, what's considered like a real profession and not. And
Right. Right.
how did the Akashic Records come to your awareness as someone who was like steeped in academia?
Yeah. Well, the funny thing is, they actually came to me before
I
I
love
was
it.
ever in the academic world. So it was more of a journey of like coming back to them, and you'll
Yeah.
see what I mean, how it all comes full circle. So I grew up in a home where my mom is a psychotherapist and a healer, and she found the records first. So
Wow.
she started reading all of the Linda Howe books and doing readings for her clients and learning how to open the records for herself and all of that. And she would often introduce me to these new modalities, and practices that she was learning about. So when I was around 17, 18, she said, "Oh, there's such a thing as the Akashic Records. I think it might be helpful if you look into this."
Wow.
So I was open to that because she would always direct me to really cool places.
Yeah.
So then I started exploring the records myself, just as a tool for kind of daily life to open and see what's there, what guidance do I need to receive, as a tool to refine my intuition, these kinds of things. So just as a personal healing journey. And then I started realizing, oh, maybe I can actually use this as a tool to be of service and help others. Um, but then again, funnily enough, because I am so highly sensitive, empathic, I feel things very deeply. So there was a phase in my life where I turned away, I would say, from the spiritual dimension
Yeah.
of my life and from the intuitive gifts and all of that. So I went into the academic world. I retreated up into the head and the mental space, the intellectual space, because it just felt safe to do that. It felt comfortable. I was getting external validation and approval
Yeah.
for being up in the head all the time. And it just felt like easier that I didn't have to feel all of my feelings all the time.
Yeah.
So that's why I went into the academic world. Other reasons, of course,
Yeah.
because I do love literature and I do love teaching. So there's a lot of good that came out of it. But eventually I realized, oh, hold on, there's something missing here. There's a piece missing. Maybe I'm not exactly where I'm supposed to be, or being, of the most service that I
Yeah.
can be. There's something missing in my heart. So I feel that's when my heart kind of started knocking on the door again, like, hold on, I'm here too. I'm here too. You need to listen. Um, so that's when I realized, oh, maybe I need to go back to all of the spiritual stuff and the records. And that's when I learned about Reiki and energy healing and all these other modalities that I now integrate in the work that I'm doing.
Well, and it's so beautiful. Thank you for sharing part of your story. I know you have
Yeah, of course.
a much more expanded story than that
Right.
I've heard through. So if you want Josephine's full backstory of how she immigrated and the whole thing, that's on
Oh,
her
there's a lot.
podcast.
Yeah,
There's a
right.
lot.
There's a lot.
It's so common the way you just articulated it. I'm sure you see this in your work too, where people will say like, "Oh, I just got a stirring," or "I just felt incomplete. I enjoyed this work for a while," or "I knew something wasn't resonating anymore." So I love that that's a part of your journey because I think it's so resonant for all of us, right?
Yeah, that's so true. And I like how you're framing it because it's not, for a while I think looking back at academia and I would sort of demonize it, in my
Yeah.
own thinking about it, in my own self narrative about my story. And it would be like, oh, those awful years in
Yeah.
academia where I was just living from the neck up. But if I really look back on it, honestly, there was also a lot of good there. I learned so much. I had to be there for a lot of different reasons. There were patterns that I had to face that I wouldn't have been able to face in any other venue, like my
Yeah.
perfectionism, right? Or the seeking for approval. So all of those things really came up to the surface for me to heal in that environment. And it was just part of my purpose to be there. And then eventually I outgrew that purpose. And then I had to transition into something that felt more heart centered. But that's okay. I think
Oh,
wherever
yeah.
we've been, whatever detours we've taken, it can be part of our evolving purpose.
I totally agree. And I love the way you said that because I feel like typically for most of us, it is more in hindsight that we realize, oh, I gained so much, even though maybe there was aspects of this that I could see where I could have made different choices or, I don't know. So I think sometimes we like to identify them as better choices, but I don't think that's always the case
That's
based
true.
on like who we were in that moment. Right. But it's amazing that you were able to come back to what you knew. And I love that kind of looking back, we can see where, like, look, I'm sure you wrote courses and writing and literature courses. I mean, and now
Yeah.
you're so able to, it's not wasted time, so to
No.
speak, because you're applying it and then immediately could start seamlessly moving into teaching because you already had those skills. So that's
Oh,
pretty
yeah.
incredible.
Oh, I'm so grateful that I have those skills and understanding of like how to create a course curriculum
Yeah.
or how to help students navigate a course and keep them engaged. So
Those are
those
all crucial
skills
elements for
are, yeah,
sure.
really important. And also just that I got comfortable over those years of lecturing like in front of hundreds of people. So now I
Yeah.
can do things like podcasts or teach groups, and it feels like second nature by now. So yeah,
Oh,
really
I'm
grateful.
sure. Well, and would you talk a little bit about that transition period? Because I'm sure that there was, like you said, it was stirring and you were thinking, oh, maybe I should return to looking at my own Akashic records. I'm sure there was like a time period in there where
Oh
you were still in your, like, what we call your muggle job.
yeah. Yeah,
And
right.
before you gave yourself permission to step out as this powerful healer
Yeah.
and teacher and record reader that you are.
Oh yeah, and I am a risk averse person.
I feel you, girl.
So, right? And not everyone is like that, that's perfectly fine. Like some people realize, oh, there's something missing in my job right now, so I'm gonna go in tomorrow and quit
Yeah.
and just go for it, which I completely respect. Like my husband is more like that. He's done that maybe 3 times in
Wow.
his life, and I just look at him from the outside like, wow, that takes some guts.
For sure.
But he's always landed, like where he was supposed to be next. But anyway, I am more risk averse, so it took probably a couple of years. First of realizing, oh, this is really not the place where I'm meant to be, and then accepting that
Yeah.
because I had worked, towards the PhD and all of that for so long and had invested so much time, money, energy. And for so long, it just felt like, okay, I'm going to be a professor. That's the path. And there just was no question about it.
I mean, it makes perfect sense is what you went to school for, like you said.
Right?
Like, of course,
Yeah,
that would be the next thing.
exactly. That was the path. And I had been just automatically, following the steps and jumping through the hoops and all the things to get to that end point. So just I feel like releasing the resistance to that being the truth, that, oh, actually, this is not the path, or maybe this path is complete now.
Yeah.
And I can just get the degree and then exit out of academia and do something else. So that took its own time, because it's not overnight. Sometimes if we're wrestling with that inner conflict of where am I actually supposed to be, and can I even trust my inner knowing
Yeah. That's a
about
good point.
this and my intuition? And if I do, then what happens? Like,
Yeah.
is my life gonna unravel? So it took a while of wrestling with that, going to see my own healer for a couple of years. I would see her every 2 weeks. And she's also, by the way, my Akashic Records teacher and mentor.
I love it.
So I was doing a lot of her courses at the same time, and taking a lot of her trainings. So that's how I became a certified intuitive healer. So there were a couple of years where I had almost like one foot in the academic world, continuing that track, and then another foot gaining all of the skills and getting the training, and kind of playing with the idea of, oh, is this more where I'm supposed to be with all the spiritual work? And eventually I kept getting pulled in that direction. It felt like that's what really makes me feel alive.
Yeah.
And for me, that's a really important like measure of when I am on point with my purpose, or where I am aligned with my purpose, is if I wake up and I feel really alive and excited to learn more about it and do that work. So then once I realized that, and it was really clear, and it was also really clear that if I stayed in academia, it just was not going to be a sustainable a choice for me,
Right.
for my personality, for my health, for my sanity. It just was not compatible anymore. So that's when I just decided, okay, I'm going to finish. I'm going to get my degree because I worked so hard,
Yeah.
and it means something. So I'm just going to complete it. And I like to complete things, sometimes
Yeah.
to a fault, but this I felt was important. And then I said, okay, I'm going to complete it. Then I'm going to take a couple months off, which was basically the summer. And then I just started building my business after that.
That's amazing. You bring up so many good points. I think it's so valid to just acknowledge that as humans, we kind of, don't love discomfort, we resist
Mm-mm.
it. But often when it's time for a chapter to wrap up,
Yeah.
our soul will continue to make us more and more uncomfortable to like, get the process rolling. But I love that you also simultaneously held this feeling of like, okay, I get this. I hear this feeling, or I feel this feeling. I'm going to come complete with what I've already set out to do, this degree, and then I'm going to give myself permission and move on. So that's really
Right.
incredible that you were able to do that. The other
Yes.
thing I want to touch into is that I know from your work that you believe that these gifts are natural and available to all of us, and we all have our own flavor maybe of them, but there are spiritual gifts for everyone. But just because they're a natural part of us doesn't mean that we should magically know how to use them all without any training, mentorship, personal healing. I would love if you would share a little bit more about that part of your journey too.
Yeah. That's such an important point.
Yeah. We hear people have these gifts and we think like, oh, I must not have that because
Right.
I'm not doing it like that. But sometimes we got to marinate a little bit.
We do. I know. Yeah. I do think, I firmly believe we all come in with a set of unique, really powerful, deep gifts and
Yeah.
contributions that I feel we're meant to make, if we are to fulfill our purpose in this lifetime. But sometimes those gifts, get covered up with
Yeah.
other things. So conditioning, like social conditioning, family programming, people telling us we're not good enough,
Yeah.
indirectly or directly, and then we start to internalize that message. So I feel the gifts can get covered up with a lot of grime, if you
Yeah.
will,
That's a good way to say it.
um, and just confusion or misperceptions about who we really are and what we're really capable of. So I do think it requires some inner work and healing work to clear out the stuff, right?
Yeah.
And then we can polish the gifts and reclaim the gifts that are already there. It's just that they're underneath maybe that layer of stuff that we
Yeah.
can't fully see them or feel like we have them, which again is a misperception.
Yeah.
But the other important thing is that I do feel it's really valuable to have mentors that have, especially with something like the Akashic Records, right? Or any
Yeah.
of these healing modalities. Um, so to have mentors that have been using them for years, decades, that kind of know the ins and outs, that know what the challenges are that tend to come up repeatedly as we start to implement and use these tools in our lives. Because it's so helpful to have that as a
Oh,
roadmap.
yeah.
Yeah. So I feel the training is important. It doesn't mean you need to get certified in a million
Right.
things, right? To feel like now I'm a credible healer. Um, but I feel just for the mentorship and to get to practice all of those tools and skills and polish those gifts, as I said, it can be really invaluable.
Yeah, I think so too. And even, I mean, I think there's different levels and layers to it because I do believe it's important for us, as I know you do, to continue our own processing. You know, we're always greeted with things in the world, in our life, in our relationships, in our work that we get to continue processing to a deeper level. But then the second layer is then if you are someone who wants to employ these things with clients or even friends, or that's a whole different level of holding space that, I mean, there's just such a nice transition of mentoring or apprenticing to do the work, which is why I love the way that you do your programs.
Right. Yeah. And that's, I feel, probably the biggest value that people get
Yeah.
out of the programs is that they walk away feeling fully equipped to be able to hold that compassionate, healing space for
Yeah.
others, which is not always easy
True.
and can really challenge us and can trigger our own ego stuff and our own patterns. So we focus a lot on client work and how to navigate that and how to stay really steady in ourselves, so that we can bring those gifts that we have and then be with people no matter what they are experiencing, like without trying to fix it for them,
Yeah.
without taking too much responsibility of our clients' feelings or challenges, right? And really helping
Yeah.
them to take ownership of their lives.
Well, those are all such important facets in there too that I think sometimes, for me anyway, and for a lot of students that I work with, I see there's always elements to the work that we don't anticipate, right? And so
Completely.
sometimes it's things like that. Like, oh, wait,
Yes.
I didn't realize, sometimes we're focused on one aspect of the work and don't realize there's these other things, challenges, things to
Completely.
know that'll bubble up. So that's so great.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's like how if you have someone who's been using these tools or doing this work for decades
Yeah.
with a bunch of client experience, then they will likely be familiar with some of those unexpected challenges that can come up. So that can be so helpful.
Yeah, it's just so important. I think I agree with you. Will you share some examples of ways that accessing the Akashic records can help people? Because I think a
Yeah.
lot of people don't even know like all what they can know in there or how that
Right. I
applies.
know. I know. And that's the thing because, well, really, it's like endless things that we can do and
Yeah.
discover and heal in the records. So again, it's really it's hard for our human minds to kind of wrap
Yeah.
around it. Um, but the information that is recorded in the records, well, no, I want to put it this way. Time is not linear inside of the records. So everything there is happening at the same time simultaneously. So we can go in and, for example, heal past life trauma. So the classic example that I tend to go to, because I see this so often in clients and students, is for those of us who have had previous lifetimes as healers or
Hmm.
visionaries, mystics, of some sort. Sometimes we have lifetimes where those gifts were not so well received, and maybe we were persecuted or cast out of the tribe, jailed, killed, whatever it might have been. So there might be residual past life trauma from that,
Yeah.
which then we carry into the next lifetime unconsciously, right? It just happens automatically because these past life traumas become embedded in our energy field, in our energetic DNA. So we carry that into the next lifetime. And then let's say, for example, that I'm working with a client who is growing a business right now. So growing their own spiritual business now as a healer. And they're hitting up against all of these challenges, maybe procrastination or feeling like what they have to bring to the table is not good enough, or
Yeah.
everyone else is already doing this work. What's the point, right? I have nothing valuable to contribute that someone is going to want to pay me for. And so these kinds of self doubts that can come up. But if we go deeper and if we open the records and we ask, what is the root cause for these challenges in growing my business, right? Just as an example, as a healer. Or what is the origin point of this? So do I need to go back in time to figure something out that ignited these kinds of challenges and is still fueling them? So you can open the records and go back and see, oh, okay, right. Actually, this starts, 15 lifetimes ago. We don't need to know the number. It doesn't matter. I'm just saying as an example.
Yeah.
But it starts way back in a previous lifetime where I had that experience of a trauma, of being cast out, of being rejected, of being mocked or jailed or killed for my gifts. And so now that fear is coming up as I am building my business or becoming more visible. I see that all the time when people start to get more visible,
Yeah.
or their businesses kind of start taking off, and then there's like a pullback, or self-sabotage patterns that can come in. So we can go into the records and ask, what's the origin point? And then go back to that point in time and then address that trauma when it actually happened. Which then helps to clear it across all dimensions of time and space. So it's also clearing it in the present. And then people just tend to feel a relief and a release, and they can move forward without the patterns that are getting in the way. So I think that's just one example. But we can also do what I call present time work. It's not always about past lives.
Right.
So the records are so useful for discovering and fully aligning with our soul's purpose. That's really an ideal, the records are an ideal tool for doing that and for getting guidance about that. So I often use it in that way. We can also open the records and heal relationships, right? So go in and ask, do I have some type of soul level contract with this person, so and so, whoever it is, my mother, my father, my spouse, my friend who's always triggering me, my business partner. So we can go in and take a look and see, oh, is there a contract you've made that's not serving you? And then we can revoke the contract. So these are like unconscious contracts that we make sometimes. So there's really no limit to what we can do. Yeah. Does that answer it?
Yes, you said so much, and there's so much to unpack. I have to tell you, for me personally, in my earlier development, this was one of the most profound things, learning about the Akashic record and your record keeper and all of
Yeah.
that, and getting to go in. And it was so profound to me to see exactly what you described, past life scenarios where I was persecuted. And I know we're getting way out there woo-woo, guys, but anyone who knows me knows like this where I live. So there's sometimes it can show up in our work, but like you were saying, it can show up in so many different areas of our life. Even you stepping into your role as a teacher, I'm sure aspects, came up for you about, being in front of a group of people and that, what that feels like. And it's, to your point, it's not always past life stuff, but that can be a huge, profound part of the healing. I want to talk about contracts a little bit.
Okay.
I love this work. I don't talk about this a lot, but I believe, and I think you do as well, that before, first of all, we talk a lot on this podcast about how we're a soul having a human experience just in this physical vehicle for this time period of, however long we're on this planet this time. But we come in with these agreements that we make with other people, with situations. I believe we even choose our team, our guides and supporters and inspirers. We have a part in all of that. So I'd love you to speak a little bit more to that, because I know you have such an expertise in this too.
Oh, and I agree with everything you just said, that it is all orchestrated in advance. based on the lessons that we have yet to learn or that we haven't mastered yet, based on what would be for the highest healing and evolution, not only of ourselves, but of everyone in our lives, and ultimately of humanity, if we want to get really big about it.
Really broad.
So the way I look at it and the way I've understood it through my work with the records is that, well, everything you said just now, I look at those things as what I call soul level agreements, which we make, I feel, in that period in between lifetimes.
Yeah.
So when we, leave a physical body and a physical lifetime behind and kind of return to all that is, and return to that just being a soul. I don't know exactly what happens or where we go, but I just see it, we're just floating around somewhere and totally light and not hindered by a human body. And that's when we're making those soul level decisions, agreements. Okay, so-and-so is going to come in and really trigger me about this particular issue so that I can actually heal it. And
I have to tell you, sorry to interrupt you, but I think you're going to think this is funny. When I first started learning about this, the way my guides showed it to me was like, yeah, you have this team of, people that are guides that are going to help you. And it's like when you go to a cruise and you're like signing up for all your excursions.
Oh, I love that.
We like sign up for all these experiences in our lifetime.
That's exactly it. There is we're basically signing up for the cruise adventures, right?
Exactly.
That we're going to have. I like that a lot. So we're making those soul level agreements. Now, sometimes just because our soul is making them doesn't mean they're always going to be fun and like unicorns and rainbows. Because sometimes a soul level agreement could be, oh, I'm going to struggle with this illness, right? This physical illness, or with this relationship issue, or whatever it might be. Just because at that higher vantage point, our soul is wiser and more aware of what is needed for ourselves and for everyone involved to get the most healing out of the situation or the circumstance.
Well, there's like a different big picture view from the soul perspective too, right?
Exactly. Yes, it is a big picture view. And then we come into a body and it's like, wait, I don't want to go through that.
Exactly.
Right? And we resist.
Like, I don't get it.
Yeah. And it can be so challenging. And of course, people will say, I don't believe, like, I can't believe that I chose this for myself at a soul level. Like, what does that even mean? That doesn't make sense. But it still doesn't mean that it's not true. So those are soul level agreements. Now, through the records, I also work with what I call past life or karmic contracts and vows. So the difference, really the key distinction, is that those contracts we make in a past life. So we make them from a human limited point of view in reaction to some kind of trauma, like what we were talking about before. So the difference there is that we are making these contracts out of reactivity, out of an intense emotion. So maybe fear or an emotion of abandonment or jealousy or rage or whatever it might be. So let's say with our example of, someone in a past life who was a healer and was persecuted for it. So unconsciously, in response to that trauma in that past life, that person as a human might have made a contract such as, I will never use my intuitive gifts again, or I'm shutting down my ability to see through my third eye, these kinds of things. Or I will never make any money using my spiritual gifts, which again is a really common one for healers. So those are the kinds of unconscious past life contracts or vows that we might have made, and we're not making them from a soul level perspective. So these are the ones that we can actually go into the records and clear. Because once we become conscious of them, we become conscious of how they have been limiting us or how they're manifesting in our current lifetime. experience, then we can go in and say, okay, through my free will, I choose to revoke this now. I mean, I have a whole involved process for
Yeah.
revoking contracts. Um, but the point is that we get to choose if we don't want to experience that anymore, that we can go in and clear that out.
And to your point, I mean, this is where it gets so layered, right? Because some of it can be these vows and contracts we made in our past human lives, but then even in earlier parts of this lifetime, for example, we can,
Oh,
through like beliefs and patterns and
yes.
observations that younger versions of us make, we can kind of
Yes.
create these messy
Yes.
contracts and vows even in this current lifetime. So I love
Completely.
that, like you said, since it's not linear time and space, since it's all of the information of our soul in one, what record house, so to speak,
Hmm.
we can access all of those in these multi-layered ways. So it's
Yes.
there's just so much to this work. I
Yeah.
love
Well,
it.
typically I call those unconscious agreements that we've made in the current lifetime.
Yeah.
And I see so much of how those show up in clients and students, especially as it relates to um, unconscious agreements that we've made with our family of origin, for example.
Oh yeah.
So there
Hmm.
might be an unconscious agreement about, oh, I'm never going to earn more money than my
Yep.
father, or I'm never going to outshine my sister, and I'm just going to hide in the background, right? Um, so we can carry those, and we can also carry inherited unconscious agreements coming down through the family line. So yeah, it is really layered. It can get a little bit overwhelming, but ultimately, the most important thing is that we take a look at what is actually going on in my lifetime right now. So with the
Yeah.
records, I always bring it back to current lifetime relevance so that we don't get, kind of lost in the past lives and the what kind of contract is this? Because
Hmm.
ultimately, what matters most is what are you experiencing right now, or what is causing you suffering right now, and how can we use the records as a tool to get out of that suffering or to alleviate it. And if there is some kind of contract, then we will be shown by the record keepers. So it doesn't have to be this like overcomplicated process either.
Well, and I love that you highlight that as the way in, just the things that we feel that aren't resonating with us in our current life, that,
Hmm.
like you said, a push pull where we know we're maybe not on the path of our soul's highest expression. Those things don't have to be these like negative bad guys in our story. It
Right.
can be a catalyst for us. So it's so empowering the way that you teach this work.
Yes, well, thank you for saying that. But yeah, I try to bring it down. Like sometimes we just have to bring it back down to basics and ask a question like what you're saying of, okay, hold on. In my current lifetime experience, how am I not aligning with my soul's fullest expression, right? Or
Yeah.
how am I holding back that full expression of who I really am? And then maybe just use that as like an anchor question that we can go back to time and time again and get different kinds of answers, information, guidance about what needs to be released. Because
Yeah.
again, if there is a contract or unconscious agreement, it will naturally come up. So it doesn't mean we have to go like dig around or try to figure it all out and fix it. It's just better to have that one essential question and then allow the information to pour in as it needs. Because sometimes the other thing is, well, the record keepers will always give us exactly what we most need in that moment, and also only what we are ready to hear and work through.
Yeah.
So if your listeners are ever in the records or trying to access the records and it feels like an overwhelming experience, then typically that's not a good state to be in. So it's better to close the records, get out, get into a more emotionally stable, grounded state, and then go in and just surrender
Yeah.
to whatever the record keepers need to give you in that moment, and having a lot of trust that whatever the experiences that you're having in the records for that one moment or that one reading is exactly what you most need. And sometimes that's we might resist that. Maybe we're not getting anything, or it's like we're opening and we're just sitting there, or it feels like we are missing a piece of the puzzle, so we don't know how to put the information together, or there's
Yeah.
an image coming through and we're not quite sure what it means. So we always have to trust 100% that what we're getting is exactly what is most needed in that moment, and try not to overthink it or second guess it, which is
So
challenging.
you brought up so many good things, but two things I want to just touch in. You had mentioned it earlier that while in the records and on the other side, time and space is not exist like it does here, time and
Right.
space does exist here. So
Yeah.
sometimes we've set
Yeah.
out the intention or gone into the records or whatever it is we're working with to say, like, okay, I'm ready to understand this or have more information. It doesn't mean that immediately in that moment, sometimes it needs to move around in our field a little while, or it might come to us in like the days following or
Yep.
or show up in our life in different ways. So I think it can be so easy to get discouraged sometimes.
Oh, I know. Yeah. And it's like sometimes we need to understand something else first,
Yeah.
or have some other life experience first before we're going to get that information that we're asking about.
Yeah.
So really, I think surrender is the key attitude in working with the records, and the attitude that we have to try to go back to over and over again.
Yeah. Well, and I love something else that you said. I mean, all the things, but I think as a guiding light, it's an amazing question that you just shared for anyone to use as a journaling prompt or
Oh,
a
completely.
pondering or meditation prompt. Where am I
Yes.
holding back? Right. Because I
Yes.
think most of us that are awakened to some degree, or certainly if you're even interested in the work that you or I do, you do have a sense of intention of being more in alignment with your soul self or
Yeah.
whatever that is. So sometimes we think like, oh, well, I feel like I am trying to be in alignment, but then it's reframing the question the way you did of where am I holding back?
Right.
I think it's not that it's not hard to identify, but I think sometimes we know where we're holding back or can find
Yeah.
it.
Right. But again, we might have resistance,
Yeah.
right? To surrendering the things we need to surrender.
Yeah.
Because I think another good question might be, what do I need to release in order to fully express who I am at a soul level? Because sometimes it's not, the thing that we're missing maybe is that we have certain attachments to things, or to
Yeah.
life being a certain way, or to certain relationships even, that could be holding back that authentic expression of who we really are. But I love your idea of using these questions even just as journaling prompts, because
Yeah.
the thing with the records that I really hope people will get is that, just as I keep saying, it doesn't have to be a complicated process of opening the records. And number two, you don't some a lot of people, a lot of students that come into my certification program have already been accessing the records spontaneously
Yeah.
without any kind of complicated method or prayer.
Yeah.
um and I know some teachers are would like cringe if they hear me say that, because they're like really sticklers about, you have to do it this particular way. But to me, I feel what has distinguished me as a teacher is that I just have this belief that there are infinite ways of getting into the records. I'm not
Yeah.
going to dictate to you the way that makes sense to you to go into the records. So it is completely possible to sit down with a clear intention and just start writing, ask the question and then just start writing with the intention of, I want to connect to the Akashic Records and receive some information about this. And just open
Yeah.
yourself up to that experience and see what unfolds, right? So just keeping it really simple.
Well, I love the way you say that. There are infinite ways, versions. We're only limited by our creativity. We're all different and at different times in our life.
Yeah.
I know that your certification program is currently closed because you're running it. But
Yeah.
for anyone who's maybe interested in getting on your wait list for next year, would you just share a little bit more about what the program is, how, all the
Oh,
things?
absolutely. Yes. Thank you for asking me that. And I
Yeah.
will say the wait list is already open,
Okay, great.
so people can get on it right now.
And
Um,
then I'm sure if they're on the wait list, they'll get more information from
oh,
you. And
absolutely.
okay, of
Yes.
course, I'll link that in the show notes. So anyone who's listening and wants to check it out,
Oh,
look in the show
great.
notes. The link will be there.
Yes. Um, but so basically, this is an Akashic Records certification program for practitioners, or people hoping to become practitioners. So typically, I say there's no experience that you already need to, like prior experience that you need to have with the records. So I have students coming in with, they've read a couple of books about the records and maybe tried to go in once or twice. And then I have other students who have been, like, even right now, I have someone who has had an acupuncture business practice for 2 decades, right? And
Wow.
she's been working with the records already. She's taken other certifications, but she felt she was missing something. So she came in to learn more and do more in the group. So there's really a vast range of skill sets, experiences, backgrounds, which I think is nice because everyone gets to work together and
Yeah.
practice the tools together. Um, but at any rate, so really the foundation of the program and how we start is building your own relationship with the records, because that's where it all has to begin.
Yeah.
Because you need to have that solid personal connection to the records. And again, as we were saying, that's different and unique to everyone. So I teach through this program all of the protocols, the techniques, the healing techniques, the modalities, all the things that we can do through the records, including revoking contracts or ancestral family line healing through the records. How to combine energy healing with the record, so like clearing the energy system of a client, and so much more. But it all starts with that personal relationship to the records. And I really encourage my students to make everything that they learn in the program their own. So again, I would never dictate and say you have to do it this one way that I'm teaching you or it's not valid. So I want people to be creative, to experiment, and really kind of run with it. And also to develop that relationship with the records so that they themselves can ask, okay, records, how do you want me to use you? Right?
Yeah.
Through my business, through my life. So to find that unique expression of how the records want to be used by them is a really essential part of the program. So we work over 16 weeks together and we meet every week. So it's pretty involved and there's homework in
That's
between.
great.
And there's a private Facebook group and all the little, logistical things, bells and whistles. And then students get to practice with each other so that they can really master the protocols and like
Yeah.
know, okay, how do you walk a client through a contract revoking session? Or how do you help a client heal the past life trauma? How do you work with family trees inside of the records to heal the family lineage stuff? So it's pretty comprehensive, I would say.
And I know sometimes it can sound overwhelming, like there's so many parts, but I know the way you do it is breaking it down into more bite size understandings of these individual tools and techniques and
Yep,
protocols. And it's like, I kind of think of it like the tool belt, right? Or the toolkit. And then
exactly.
you're training on not even just case by case, but like day by day, because things change day by day
Yeah,
for us, how to, which tools someone might use in combination or how to understand. And like you said, how to use the existing tools and protocols to then develop each person's own
yeah.
particular secret sauce way of doing it.
Exactly. Yeah, you said it perfectly. And it's
That's so
also
cool.
just, I want to give my students like everything I've learned, everything I know, everything I've developed in working with the records, because they're going to have it, for the rest of their lives. And I really
Yeah.
want them to get their money's worth, which is just
Yeah.
like a thing with me. And I really want them to get so much value out of it. And then they can pick and choose, oh, okay, this one protocol really resonates with me. Like when
Yeah.
I use it, it really clicks. It's really clicking for my clients. It's facilitating transformations. But these other things, maybe I'm not going to use because I don't care about them as much, which is completely okay too.
I love that. I don't know if you'll agree with this, but I once had I trained for several years as a trance medium, and that teacher, several of us when we came into the course were like, is this like for me, am I supposed to be here? I know as humans we get
Oh,
that insecure, am I supposed to be here? And the way
yeah.
he said it was, if you're feeling called to it and you're even interested in this work, it's probably for you. Do you
Right.
agree with that?
Yeah. Well, and I agree completely. And with the records, particularly, it's not even me that people
Yeah.
are called to, although sometimes it is me, like specifically as a teacher, which I am so humbled and honored by. But it's more the records that are
Yeah.
calling to them, and that call is never accidental. And it's going to keep coming and calling on you. Like if there's work that you're supposed to be doing inside of the Akashic Records for personal healing or to be of service to other people on this planet, then that call tends to be pretty insistent. Like you'll start to
Yeah.
see the records mentioned in different places, or you'll start to see books about the records everywhere. So until you follow that calling, like you're gonna keep hearing it.
Well, and I think that's just such a powerful way of even how we can see in our real, tangible lives of how these soul contracts or things we agreed to learn in this lifetime
Yes.
can kind of poke their heads up here and there through synchronicity in the world around us.
Yeah, that's so true. And it is true that I feel like even now, for example, I'm teaching the program. I have 14 people in there, and I feel with each of those 14 people, I have a soul level agreement
Yeah.
and they have one with me that they would come into this experience. And they also have agreements with each other, right? Because
Isn't
otherwise
that
the group
amazing?
would be different and it would have come
Yeah.
together differently. Um, so there's soul level agreements like all around, and we're all fulfilling our particular purposes in this program. I'm learning so much. I'm hitting up against some patterns and having to clear them like as
Yeah.
I teach. So it's really just a process of healing, growth, evolution for all involved.
It's just so beautiful. And I love the way that you said it. That's a great way to say
Oh,
it.
thank you.
Well, thank you for sharing all of your understanding of the records and about your course and all of the gifts that you have discovered through working with the records. Are you up for a spirit speed round
Yes,
4 question?
I would
A
love
little
to
bit of
do it.
fun.
Yes.
Exciting. Okay.
Okay,
So
cool.
the first question is, if you would share one thing that really shocked you or was unexpected about working with the Akashic Records.
Oh, wow. Um, I think, well, when I first started, what was most unexpected was like the hilarious sense of humor that the record keepers have.
Yeah.
But also how sometimes they can be like pretty, I don't want to say harsh, but blunt,
Yeah.
direct, straightforward. They can just close the doors on you, like if you're asking the same thing over and over, or wanting a different answer, or not doing the work. So that was unexpected. Just the sense of humor and how straightforward they are, and how they don't allow us to get away with any human drama.
I love that.
Yeah.
That's perfect. I've had them tell me, come back when you finish the last two
Yeah,
things that we gave you.
exactly.
So,
Things like that. Exactly. Yes. It's like they don't hold back,
uh,
because they can see our full potential. So they don't have
absolutely.
any patience for us, like getting in our own way.
Our
Yeah.
humanness. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. If you got to spend a day in the spirit world, like on the other side, you got the full tour, you got to spend time with everyone you've ever known who's crossed over, and it's almost time to return to your life, and your guide tells you you have 1 hour left and you can spend it with anyone who's on the other side that you want. Who do you choose and why?
Wow. That's a powerful question. So even as you were asking, instantly what I could see in my mind's eye was like taking a walk with my grandpa,
Oh, I
who
love
has
that.
passed, who has crossed over already to the
Yeah.
other side. And I feel there's so much that, so he died before I started doing my spiritual work, really, like while I was still in academia. So I feel there's so much we could discuss, and I'm sure so much he could teach me over from the other side.
Yeah.
And it would just be so nice to be in his presence
Oh, I
again.
love that. What a
So yeah,
powerful connection.
yeah. He's helping me from the other
Oh
side all
yeah,
the time.
I
He's always
fully
sending me clients.
one
Yeah.
of your supporters.
Yeah.
Even though we have these spiritual gifts, we have very human lives. What is one quirky thing about you that people might be surprised to learn?
Oh, wow. Well, I don't know if they'd be surprised, because, well, sometimes it can be obvious, or if they've heard my podcast ever, it can be. I'm pretty honest there about all of my humanness, as you
Yeah.
said. um, a quirk. Well, I'm a neat freak
Oh, I love it.
and a recovering control freak. So I have always have struggled with like wanting everything to be in its quote unquote proper place or proper
Yeah.
to me, which is not necessarily what anyone else, like proper to anyone else. But that's still something that I struggle with to this day. And my husband is much more loosey goosey. We don't have to do the dishes for a couple of days. Like, just live life. It doesn't matter. So I can get pretty ragey
That's a good
about
one.
that. Yeah. And I have to remember in the moment, like, okay, would I rather have everything in its place, or would I rather be at peace
Yeah.
and just like live? So I have to keep going back to that.
Oh, that's a good one. I like that.
Yeah.
Leave us with a pearl of wisdom. What's one piece of advice that you wish that you had had early on in your understanding of your own gifts?
Oh, okay, that's big. I would say, and something that I have learned recently, actually, and I'm really trying to live it now, is that it actually doesn't matter that much to be accepted in life, like
Yeah.
by your parents, by your friends, by like society, anyone, really. Um, it doesn't really matter that much. And I used, like, to me, that was the priority in my previous life, you could say, in the same lifetime.
Yeah.
And I was constantly seeking approval from others, and I needed everyone to agree with my choices, and to say, yes, what you're doing is good, and to get a thumbs up and to get validation. And it was so freeing when I realized, oh, it actually doesn't matter that much. And the more authentic I am, and the more I show up as myself, the more it benefits everyone else too,
Yeah.
because it just frees them to be themselves. And it also magnetizes to me much more authentic friendships, client healer relationships. So the clients that come in, the students that come in, friends that come into my life, situations, just everything is so much more aligned with who I really am at that soul level. So letting go of that need for constant acceptance, I think, is really liberating, and something maybe we can all strive for.
I love that. That's so profound. And I love the way you shared about how it shows up like in the life, you know? So thank you for that. That's great.
Yes.
Well, thank you so much for being with us today. If you want to learn more about Josephine, you can go to josephinehardman.com. Again, don't worry about the spelling. I'll have it in the show notes. You just got to click it. I am so appreciative of you for being here and teaching us all about the Akashic Records today and shining your light.
Oh, yeah. Thank you for the opportunity and the space to be able to do so, and for your amazing questions and wonderful conversation. Yeah, I really appreciate you.
Well, thanks. I just loved getting to spend this time and have this conversation with my new friend, Josephine Hardman. Like I said, I've been listening to her podcast for a while now, and she just is so great at the way she breaks things down and shares them. So I'm so curious to learn from you. Did you learn something new? Did you have a term defined that you've been wondering, like, what the heck does that mean? Did you get a little more clarity on how how the Akashic Records works or how it can apply to this lifetime or how the threads connect. It's so multi-layered. I know sometimes it could take some time to like process and digest all of this information. But what I love about the way that Josephine teaches the Akashic Records is it's an all level thing because truly we do all have access to the information of our own soul. We talk about that here a lot. And sometimes it just takes having a mentor or a teacher or a guide to kind of show us the way so then we can take over the reins and do it ourselves. And it's just one of my favorite things about her work and the way that she teaches. So make sure you check her out, josephinehardman.com. You can listen to her podcast. It's called Inner Work, a Spiritual Growth Podcast. And I will have everything linked in the show notes, of course. But make sure that you give this episode 5 stars if you liked it or if you learned something. And I know we talked a little bit about signs and synchronicities. If you're someone who's still learning about signs and synchronicities in your own life, you can head on over to my website, joyfulmedium.com. And right on the homepage, I have that free 3-day mini course sign magnet. It'll teach you how to get specific signs from the universe to answer your questions or let you know you're on the right track. It'll teach you about all the recurring numbers as signs. So if you're someone that sees 222 or 444 or 1111, it teaches you all of the numbers and what they mean. And it also teaches you how to set up a specific sign with your loved ones on the other side. So if you have loved ones in the spirit world that you're wanting to get hellos and droplets of love throughout your day from them, it teaches you that as well. So if you're interested in that, head on over to joyfulmedium.com and it is totally free. It'll also put you on my VIP insiders list so you can get access to the monthly free community healings and all of the fun free workshop offerings that I have coming up for you. I hope that you have enjoyed this conversation. I totally did. And I'm so grateful to Josephine Hardman for giving us her time and her wisdom and shining her light for us today. Big hugs, lots of love from inside Spirit Speakeasy.